So how far is the East from the West? I have often heard many preachers speak about how incredible this passage is to describe how God's love for us stretches as far as the East is from the West. And then they go on to explain how a person can travel east around the ball earth and never be heading west. And this in contrast to heading north around a ball earth and supposedly finding yourself eventually heading south. Honestly, this makes no logical sense at all. On a ball, there should be no reason at all why traveling around an axis in one direction would be any different than traveling around that axis in the other, perpendicular direction. Unless, I guess, you have some preconceived notion or idea that makes it somehow different. The flat Earth model fits well with this biblical saying because heading east and west in that model would be going around in a circle, while heading north and south would involve the traveler running into that supposed non-traversable outer ring called the South Pole. This is just another interesting point that supports the flat Earth, biblically inspired model. I've also heard flat earthers say things like round earthers believe in their religion of the vacuum of outer space because of their pseudoscience. Here's an internet definition of pseudoscience. Quote, "Pseudoscience consists of statements, beliefs, or practices that claim to be both scientific and factual, but are incompatible with the scientific method. Pseudoscience is often characterized by contradictory, exaggerated, or unfalsifiable claims, reliance on confirmation bias rather than rigorous attempts at refutation, lack of openness to evaluation by other experts, absence of systematic practices when developing hypotheses, and continued adherence long after the pseudoscientific hypotheses have been experimentally discredited." Unquote. Flat earthers go on to explain how round earthers explain every supposed scientific anomaly away by that magical force called gravity. They illustrate how the pseudosciences model of there being an atmosphere of gases around the ball Earth defies the second law of thermodynamics, whereas a gas with no confining spaces, an infinite vacuum around the atmosphere, would have no reason to keep those gases from dispensing evenly out into the so-called infinite universe. And they claim that the pseudoscience of gravity somehow keeps this from happening. But I'll point out that an impenetrable firmament over the Earth, like the Bible describes, and many flat earthers point out several ways we observe this, would also hold all of these gases in what we call our atmosphere. It is also quite interesting to note that outer space and the vacuum of it, according to modern science, replaces the God of the Bible that sits above the firmament, in many minds anyways, and the mystical powers, ones that science can only observe, measure, and predict, but not really at all explain, that seem to hold outer space concepts together, is the idea of gravity. And I must add that other misunderstood, or not at all understood, scientific concept called light. True scientists will openly admit that fact about their lack of true understanding of gravity and light. The Bible tells us that God Himself holds everything together, and Jesus called Himself the light of the world. Of course, I'm just using a confirmation bias inspired by the Bible to make my point, instead of the NASA openly admitted to use of computer-generated videos and images to make theirs. If any one of these kinds of ideas at all pique your interest, one could check out my 3-part video series on YouTube called Backing Up That Crazy Bus that explores these ideas and many more theological and philosophical ideas in this realm. Or another video entitled Trust the Science Bro that uses the scientific method on itself to explore the concept of what makes a scientist a so-called expert.